going to talk a little bit about transparency and also this really interesting thing that you can do with these, especially high flow colors. You can also do it with the fluid, but the high flow especially really work well with this, where the pigment just sort of floats on a stream of water, and you can create some wonderfully interesting shapes and also have color transparencies. So this is a dry one I did a while ago, and I'm using BFK paper. It's this really beautiful 100% cotton printmaking paper, drawing paper, painting paper. I really like it. And what happens is the acrylic absorbs into the surface and creates this really velvety, beautiful texture. And what also happens is that, as you can see, the pigment, when floating around in the water, distributes in really interesting ways. Like it seems to pile up right along the edges and sort of fan out in different places. And all these different pigments do different things. So I thought I would just show you how I do this. So I'm going to have a little pipette, a little medical pipette, which really comes in handy for this, but you could really, just use a brush or whatever. But the idea is to get some water sort of sitting on a, kind of beating up on your piece of paper. Do you see how it beads up like that? And then what I'm going to do is take one of my colors. I'm going to use naphtha red light. Remember, these high flows, you definitely want to shake them up until you can hear the little ball in there moving around. It's just mixing the pigment up really well with the medium that's in there. All right, so I'm going to just what I'm going to do is drop a little bit of the high flow paint onto this little tiny puddle of water that I've made here. I'm just trying to get this open so that it comes out really nicely. All right, I think that's all right now. Okay, so here we go. Watch what's going to happen here. The pigment is going to change the water tension. There we go. And it's going to start to try to get those two together. Come on, come on. There we go. Just by picking it up and moving it around here on your piece of paper, you can make some very interesting shapes. And of course, since the color below is dry, you're not going to get intermixing. You're not going to get a color that you didn't anticipate. So this is really fun. I think what I like to do is put a little bit more on here. It's kind of a skinny shape, so I'm going to just make that a bit bigger and extend it a bit more. But that water really stays on the surface there. It's interesting. This color doesn't do as many interesting things with this, with the pigment rather. It doesn't sort of do what I was. Sometimes you see more clearly right away the way the color sort of, the pigment rather sort of gathers in places. And this is what you'd be using your little straw for. You could sort of gently blow it or, move it around a little bit. You can even spray the water, make some really interesting shapes like that. But that water tension really is funny how it just stays on the surface of this piece of paper. So you're going to pull it out. But this is really terrific. And I'm going to do just another color to show you what the yellow is like. Let's see. I did a whole series of work a couple of years ago where I was using the spills as a beginning place for my work. I'm going to shake this up too. This is Diamond Light Yellow. All you need is one little drop on it. It really goes very far. And start to move that around a little bit. Yeah, interesting. All right, there you go. There you can see the way that the pigment sort of settles on the piece of paper. And if you want the yellow and red to come together, you can. I actually don't want that to happen because I want you to see the clarity of the color here. So I'm just gonna sort of suck up a little bit of that. You can also just take a piece of paper towel and yeah, bring up some extra water if you feel like you have too much water down there. This is not working as well. Getting bubbles. There we go. So now, as you can see, this is really a pretty entrancing way to work. We'll get some fun things happening. Whoops, there we go. Well, the red and the yellow did finally get together. So I'm just going to put that aside and come back to it after it's dry. But I also want to show you that you can do a similar thing on Yupo or Duralar paper. So I just want to stop this first. So I actually have, this is Duralar, and as you can see, it's translucent, not transparent. It's a plastic, and the surface is matte, so it really does take paint very well. The paint doesn't crawl on it, you know, it really sinks in, and it's a very lovely surface for acrylic. And this is Yupo, so Yupo is not, it's opaque, you cannot see through it, but they're both plastic. So this is a little bit heavier plastic. People love it for its thinness and its sturdiness. Same thing with the Duralar. So I thought that I would show you also how this kind of crawling use of the high flow in water works on these two surfaces. It's really, really interesting to try them. So let's put a little bit of our water down here. And you'll see it's a very, very different kind of an experience. Get some of our red out here. There we go. Yeah, just kind of takes it immediately. And yeah, it's a very, very different kind of an experience here. This is going to take a lot longer to dry. Oh yeah, so you can really see how the pigment moves around in there. And you get some really super interesting shapes as it dries. And if you get a little bubble, you just can poke it. It'll just go away. Well, I think I'm going to leave it there because it might do some interesting things. And when you can see what Duralar does, it's the same thing. But again, it's not going to dry, you know, nearly as fast as the paper does. It's going to really, you know, need a couple of, you know, maybe an hour or two even to dry up. But let's see what this one does. There you go. And the wonderful thing about this stuff is that, you know, you can lay it on anything, of course, after it's dry. And, you know, because you can see through it, you can, you know, even do some kind of collage treatments with them. You can, you know, really do some pretty wonderful, see, you know, kind of see what that looks like when it's on top, change the colors, you know, kind of mutes everything out. So yeah, it's really, really interesting stuff. Let's just add a little bit of red to this one so you can see what happens with that. But yeah, it's a different experience. Yeah, pretty cool, right? I could watch that all day. So yeah, it's just really fun to come back and see how they settle. By the way, this area here is a different kind of thing. I didn't do that sort of water thing with that. What I'm showing you now, this is different. So yeah, there you go. I mean, what I do, I invite you to play with the transparencies. You know what we should do is try one right now using fluid paint, because I want to show you that it's going to be different because, you know, the medium is thicker. But what I think is if you mix, you know, your paint in some water first and really you kind of get it wet, Let's use some of the iridescent bright gold. Let's just see what that does. I've got to do my cover here. This is one of the ones that you have. So yeah, it's going to need to be a little bit thinner, but I don't know, let's try it. Let's just see what happens. Okay, so yeah, it sits on the, yeah, it doesn't disperse nearly as well. I do think we need to get it a little bit wetter. So, you know, what you could do is just pour it out onto, you know, a small container, add some water to it and you know, do some interesting things. Just wet it down, stir it up, and then go ahead and see how it, you know, disperses and disperses out. But the high flow really is better. Oh yeah, you can see it going a little bit here. It's just that it's much heavier, just sort of sits in the bottom there. Let's see if we can get it to move around a little bit. Oh yeah, there it goes. Oh, yeah, it's not quite doing what the high flows do. So yeah, so that's a really fun activity. And the other thing, well, that an activity that will get you some pretty interesting surfaces and interesting places to start in your work. As I said, I've done this on huge canvases, started with a spill. And of course I'm using, you know, a lot more water. And I'm also using a little bit of that water tension breaker that helps stops this kind of thing from happening. And I don't care about it on this small surface, but in the canvas, I really did want to have it, you know, really get into this, the fibers of the canvas that I was using. Another fun thing to do is to spray water. I'll just do a little spray over here in the corner of my BFK and put some of this red. Actually, let's try a different color. Let's try some of this. This is indigo high flow. I just want to show you what happens when you have a little area of, yeah, really kind of beautiful little sort of fractal pattern that happens. See what happens when I add a little bit of this one. Oh yeah, look at that, wow. And now you can see how the pigments really push each other away. They kind of repel each other. And so, you know, that's how you get some really interesting shapes here. Color mixtures.